Hi, this is Ren.
And this is Casey.
This is All Walks of Film. Today's film, we're talking about Selma.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched this today, Martin Luther King Day, on January 19th, 2015. Selma's sort of a biopic, but also more of a collective view on the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King's march to Washington after the events in Selma and Alabama and such.
Yeah, because this film isn't a movie that takes place over Martin Luther King Jr.'s whole life, or even the whole time he was the leader of the civil rights movement.
Right.
It's a very specific period in time, and that doesn't cover the beginning or the end. It's kind of like right in the middle.
Yeah.
Which I like the fact that they did that. Instead of trying to cram everything into a 2-hour movie, they took time to be precise and accurate and show a moment in history rather than the whole everything smushed together.
Yeah, and I appreciate the director making the decision not to do a Cliff Notes version of Dr. King's life because, I mean, if you've gone to public school, most likely, I mean, you know about Martin Luther King. It's like mandated by the state, so you know about Martin Luther King. Whether or not you know certain events in his life, like the brief moment where they covered his philandering, which actually did happen. Which I thought was a very powerful scene, when they actually did it. They don't try to paint him as like a flawless saint, which I'm starting to appreciate more and more. Black filmmakers doing this, to make films about black people, that are very impactful. Like I'll go to like Fruitvale Station, as well, to not, to even the greatest people, not to paint in this like totally angelic light.
Yeah.
It's...
Although there was one shot of the movie where he was sort of painted in an angelic light.
Yeah,
actually, there was one specific shot in the film.
But in shots, I'm not talking about like in shots. I'm talking about like in the actual narrative of the film. Yeah, I thought Selma was good, and I always go into biopics skeptical because biopics for me in general suck. There are a handful of good ones, but after a while it's like, okay, well, it's just going to be this part and this part and this part. And it's just not interesting. We actually watched Schindler's List last night, which we'll talk about on a later podcast, talking about various Holocaust films and such. But we were really kind of taken back at how the story structures were very similar. Mm-hmm.
The human rights aspect, especially.
Right. This was very much a civil rights movie, about blacks getting the right to vote.
And not a Martin Luther King movie.
Yeah, it wasn't exclusively about Martin Luther King and stuff like that. There were characters that you could follow that weren't King, but were part of the movement, which
you can see in the title. Selma. I was sort of surprised they made a Martin Luther King Jr. movie without his name in it, but it's because it's not really his movie. It is very specifically about just this movement.
Yeah. Well, I guarantee you,
perfectly named.
After this movie is made, there's going to be like a straight-to-TV one that may or may not be good.
Don't.
Yeah, but there's going to be a straight-to-TV one, and then maybe like in the next 5-10 years, we'll get another King movie.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just because he's that important of a figure, and possibly like a sequel from this director, because like it only covers the kind of the beginning of the civil rights movement.
But not even the beginning. They mention in the movie that everything has taken place after his, I have a dream speech. He already has had multiple meetings and a relationship with the President of the United States.
Right.
This is some time into it. People know.
Well,
who
yeah,
he is.
he had just, like, at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, the first scene
just,
is he won a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, so, I mean, she could go before, she could go after,
Yeah.
or somebody else could go before or after, which I'm okay with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really am. And I kind of would like to see another film done in this style about King's life, just because I think that it kind of needs to be on screen. Really ballsy not to actually have the assassination, which I was really surprised about.
Yeah, well, that took place quite a while later.
Yeah, like 10 years later.
I don't think it was quite 10 years, but it was several years.
Okay.
It was several years for sure.
No. So, what did you think of the performance by David Oyelowo? I'm butchering his name. It's Oyelowo. David Oyelowo. So we're butchering it. We probably are. I'm sorry for anybody that knows how to pronounce his name, but I think we're close. He definitely got the look of King, as close as possible, right?
Yeah, but his performance was spot on. His manner of speaking and his presentation was very spot on. It was
spot on, but at the same time, it wasn't a caricature of him because I've seen impersonations of King that make it sound more like King, but like he made it his own. He wasn't just trying to like imitate the voice of King because King has a very distinct way of speaking. If you've ever heard his speeches and stuff like that, so it was close, but it wasn't exact. I mean, I could definitely tell that it wasn't. Yeah. So this opened worldwide in January, which obviously since the holidays in January, it makes sense. But really ballsy for a January movie, just because January is like the worst time for movies.
Yeah, but it's not technically a January movie. It had some release in December to make it qualify for the Oscars.
Yeah. And, I mean, if the movie wasn't as good as it was, I would just see it as an Oscar bait movie. But I really do think that this film, like, holds itself a little bit higher than, the Oscar baity type movies.
Yeah, there's definitely a certain feeling to an Oscar bait movie that gives it a little bit of falseness. Mm-hmm. And this it actually did, feeling-wise, remind me of Schindler's List because of the painstaking accuracy.
Yeah, the costuming was spot on.
Yeah.
Being somebody who, like, grew up, like, watching the videos and stuff like that, I was really shocked at how, like, the hair and all this kind of stuff. Like, there have been a lot of movies that have taken place during the Civil Rights Movement, and they get the costuming like slightly off. They try to modernize the talk and all this kind of stuff, and it just doesn't feel authentic. Whereas this movie feels very authentic to the time.
Yeah, it feels very authentic, and there are logs from like the actual FBI logs that are included in the film that kind of show you, well, this part was true, and this is kind of how accurate it is.
Yeah, I love the inclusion of the FBI logs that they had.
Me too.
Also, great performance by Carmen Ejogo for Coretta Scott King. Not only does she look like Coretta Scott King, like even more convincing than our lead. I thought she was fantastic.
But not as convincing as Malcolm X.
Oh. I'm trying to look through IMDb because this guy, the guy who plays Malcolm X in this movie, move over Denzel Washington. This guy looked like Malcolm X.
Yeah, he was only in one scene though, so...
Nigel Thatch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane how much this actor looked like Malcolm X. going on to the film, I loved the constant motif of the bridge. Mm-hmm. And that crossing of the bridge.
Yeah.
I loved how it was constantly that barrier. To see...
well, especially with this reoccurring, let's just throw them in the Alabama River.
Yeah.
Then that bridge goes directly over the Alabama River.
Yeah, there's the bridge, there's the river, and, you know, everything's, you know, blocked off.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, it's a powerful image. And, you know, it's constantly used because that is the barrier in the film to try to get the right to vote. And, yeah, I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, because this whole movement was very specifically about trying to achieve the right to vote.
Yeah.
It wasn't even overall... I mean, it was overall civil rights, but it wasn't covering the entire movement.
Yeah, I mean, it did open up with the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing that killed the 4 little girls.
Which is referenced throughout the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean that is a
be.
huge inciting moment of the civil rights movement because, you know, children being killed in any circumstance. But on top of that, you know, a church being blown up. I mean, these are things that we can't really comment too much about, you know, as far as the film like goes, except like how it's portrayed. Because I mean, of course, there are horrific moments, but the way it's conveyed in the movie, I thought was really powerful. You know, where it's like a slow mo of. You know,
well, and like
just
at first,
a part of their
at
legs.
first you don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah,
you know, and you're kind of taken in by this moment.
Yeah, I mean, you just see the red, the wood, and the legs.
Yeah,
you know, and like this movie isn't graphic.
No, it's not. It's not
bloody
graphic.
Or graphic. You know, there are
There's
brutal
a little bit
beatings.
of swearing.
Oh, well, I commend this movie because so many movies that take place during this stuff tone down the language. This movie keeps the language of the time period.
There's not a lot of language in it, though.
Well,
there's not.
For instance, the use of the N-word. Most movies talking about this period will choose to go with the lighter term. Or they'll, you know, just the common term, which I don't think this should offend anybody because, like, that is the term, that was the socially accepted term at the time, Negro.
Yeah.
You know, most films will never. In this movie. Yes, but most films taking place during that period.
If you're going to be accurate, if you're going to be accurate, you have to use it because Martin Luther King Jr. said it in his speeches. Am I wrong?
Yeah, but I'm talking about the other word.
No. I'm saying Negroes. You know, that was a term he used a lot.
And you know, I mean, that was a socially acceptable term.
At that time, that was
for black people.
Yeah. There's one point where you see the woman when she's trying to fill out her petition to vote, that she puts that as her race.
Oprah Winfrey, which, you know, bravo Oprah Winfrey. First time I've seen Oprah Winfrey and not gone like, you know, not slapped my head and been like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oprah
well,
Winfrey.
they did a lot of makeup and styling to make her not look like Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
But also she was prominent and she was in it a lot, but she didn't have a lot of lines.
Right.
She didn't talk
and that's
a lot. That's
a big difference, you know. And I really like that about the film of, you know, having so many like minor characters. Like very important characters with little lines, so you could just kind of like follow them. Yeah. You know, follow each character like throughout their, you know, struggles and stuff like that. I kind of wish the movie was longer. It's only like 130 minutes. I could have.
That's 2 hours and 10 minutes.
I could have stuck in for like 2.5 hour, 2 hour 45 minutes. even a 3-hour film for this, just because I was so like taken by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus, you know, I'm probably not going to see another King movie for another 10 years or so. So, yeah. So, was there anything that you took away from this film? Like, what? Do you have anything to say?
I mean, yeah, like you said before, it's a very cinematic, filmic movie. You know, with really not a lot of pandering.
Yeah, that's a really surprising thing. Most movies of this style, you know, tend to just be this whomping, feel good, you know, rah rah rah. Look at how awesome everybody is, you know, and how they overcome adversity and stuff like that. Oftentimes, the adversity is tamed down. Like, prime example of a movie that was really popular when I was in high school, Remember the Titans? Mm-hmm. That is a super tame version of that period. You know, like you watch that movie and it's like, oh yeah, of course Disney made this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the end of the movie, you know, like you were saying, they're usually like really feel-good movies. The actual ending is not very like boom, wah sort of thing. It's a small victory.
Yeah.
It's a very small victory for like how hard they fought throughout the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but at the same time,
it wasn't underwhelming. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
It wasn't like that. It wasn't like this was the major triumph of the civil rights movement. It was a small victory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were many different triumphs. I mean, like Rosa Parks wasn't in this film.
Well, yeah, because this was after that.
Right, but I'm saying, like, you know, like she wasn't, like she was part of the civil rights movement after the bus boycott.
No, I know.
You know, and stuff like that. What I'm saying is, like, there are like certain prominent figures that aren't present and like don't need to be for this film to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there were a lot of very prominent figures in the film.
Like, I could have said Saul Alinsky, but that would be before.
Right. No, there were a lot of prominent figures in the film who were just, like, ordinary people.
Yeah.
Or, well, like, they came across as just ordinary people,
yeah,
you know,
I mean,
in
they later
way.
became, like, congressmen and senators and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly what I mean. They weren't trying to say, like, oh, but look at his act of greatness even before blah, blah, blah. You know, they were just, like, normal people standing up for what they believed in. And it was very inclusive.
Yeah.
You know, there were white people and there were women. And, you know, there was...
Yeah, I mean, that comes later. I mean, this is probably one of the most unspoilable movies that we can talk about.
It's just history.
Yeah.
It was history on screen.
Yeah, I mean, granted, some things are dramatized and stuff like that, but like, you know, I can't even say spoiler alert for this movie because like
dramatized.
If you don't know this, like, you should. I can only understand if you're not American, but if you are from the United States, you should know this stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
And they did really also highlight the feeling of North versus South that was still prevalent at the time.
Yeah.
Not the most flattering light for Lyndon B. Johnson either.
No.
They didn't make him the bad guy either. He was just sort of caught in the middle, I guess.
I was happy about that because I've always said that I always was skeptical about this, like, just lauding praise over Lyndon B. Johnson, and like I've never felt very positive about Lyndon B. Johnson, and this film allowed me to have that.
Yeah, you know, he has his good moments and his bad moments, and his weak moments and his strong moments, and that's what a president should be like.
Yeah, and honestly, I think if Kennedy had last longer, because Lyndon B. Johnson did actually take over after Kennedy.
Yeah.
if Kennedy had lasted longer, he may or may not have been supportive of the civil rights movement. I know that there has been some negative stuff that he said about it before he passed away, but he might have changed his mind. I mean, great people have changed their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that in this movie, too, with Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah. Though they do have the balls to actually, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but they actually do have him say the N-word in the movie.
Yeah.
Which I thought was
in a private conversation, right?
In a private conversation, but I thought that was still very ballsy because that is a U.S. president that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, also a very, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a priest, and there is a preacher, but,
yeah.
He was a religious figure
Yeah.
who spoke very openly about his religion, and, there was the call to the clergy and everything, and the movie is very not super Christian spirit of God.
I was kind of shocked.
They speak about it, but it's not pushy.
I was kind of surprised by that, just because, like, I would expect, this might be actually a slight indictment to the movie. I feel that they could have pushed the religious angle more, because being that Martin Luther King
they did visually. They just didn't
visually. It's hard. Martin Luther King did so much.
No, I know. I think the visual aspects of it were enough. I thought the visual aspects of it were very strong in a religious sense.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you. I'm just saying that, like, given the length that it is, it could have, they could have made things a little bit longer and, like, had, and that might be in a deleted scene that they just didn't feel worked.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I might really want to push in that respect is maybe if there was a scene of Martin Luther King Jr. alone, sort of having some sort of religious experience. That might be interesting, but they weren't trying to push this, like, spirit of God flowing through the people sort of angle.
Yeah. I did like the fact that...
even though there are nuns and priests and preachers and everything in the movie. Yeah.
Which, for a religious figure, I know he did.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because I have some connections that, allowed me to learn more about King than a wide variety of people, because I was working on a project actually, filing different papers and stuff that he wrote and sermons and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, he was a very religious person, but a lot of things that he stood up for were, like, he was all about the inclusion of he was all about the inclusion of people and stuff like that. Now, granted, at first I was kind of scared that the film was just going to talk about the race thing, which, I mean, I get it. Most people who know about Martin Luther King only know about the push for civil rights movement. But there was more to it, which they did include. I mean, there were subtle hints and nods to, like, other movements and stuff like that, like workers and, but also, I like the fact that, yes, civil rights is very much a movement that black people were a part of and drove.
Right.
But white people did help and die for it.
Yeah,
and I like the fact...
a statistic in the movie that, like, 30% of the people...
One-third.
One-third, yeah, that's right. One-third of the people at the second march across the river were white. And
as a white person, that makes me feel good, because that means that, like, these kind of things aren't black issues. Even what goes on today should not be black issues.
Right.
They should be human issues. Race shouldn't be a factor. I mean, that's what these very movements were about. Destroying the racial barriers between people.
Exactly, and not white people were evil because they were in power and had privilege.
Yes.
There really was... I never once got that feeling.
That is something that, like, if you watch other biopics that take place during that time, there's a very clear, like, black and white pardon my pun, but yeah, there's a very clear black and white, and usually the white people are bad, the black people are good, and then there's some white people that are good too. You know, but
maybe like one or two, not like as a movement.
Right. You know, or it's like a football team that's good.
Or
something. You know, something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's conveyed in sports movies.
Right.
You know, like how many sports movies can you think of that are like about like racial tension and stuff like that and let's play some ball.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, football overcomes all creeds and nations and everything.
Yeah, except only people in the United States play football.
Yeah.
That is
I was talking about American football.
That is American football.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, this has been All Walks of Film, and thanks for listening. Bye.